Welcome back, everybody. This is going to be the Game Developers live stream where we talk to game developers about the work they're doing. Our audience is normally game developers, but we are happy to invite you all in, whether you're a fan, a game developer in the industry or not. This is your chance to see a behind-the-scenes view of games getting made, games using new technology, games with really cool ideas. So I'm super excited today because I've got Susan Cummings here, who I've known for a really long time, all the way back to the earliest days of my own game studio, Disruptor Beam. And a few years ago, when I was talking about generative AI for the first time, just when it was just beginning to get popular around 2020, 2021, back in the six-fingered hands days and all that kind of stuff that we were laughing at. Well, it's gotten a lot more serious over the last few years, but one of the things I was always really focused on was this idea of utilizing AI not only as a tool for helping developers make games, but the new generation of games that could become possible by making AI part of the gameplay loop itself. So I want to be able to talk about all of that. Susan has been working on a really compelling game that I'm going to allow her to introduce. So without further ado, Susan, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into what you've been working on, and we can cover the full gamut of AI in the loop, out of the loop, production, and really any other AI we want to talk about as well.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure my phone is on silent because that would be the worst. Hi, I'm Susan Cummings. I thank you for having me, John. Yeah, we've known each other a long, long time now. I am the CEO and co-founder of 106 Games, which I started with my husband. Lee and I met 28 years ago, and we've been working together ever since. So we used to joke back then that we wanted to be Ken and Roberta Williams, and I'll never achieve that greatness, but it's been really fun trying over the years. So anyway, we started a new studio about 1.5 years ago, but I've been in the industry obviously. Well, I was one of the co-founders of 2K Games. That's probably the best thing I've done in my career. But these days we started a new studio about 1.5 years ago, and essentially brought a little rock band together of my husband and I, and some of our favorite people that we've been lucky enough to work with over the last year, 5 years or so. And we said, look, we don't know what's going to come out of this. We don't have a lot of money yet, but we want to tinker with some of the AI things that we've been messing with for the prior year. And so that was the beginning of building something we call our Infinity platform, and a game called You vs. Zombies, which is coming out this summer. But essentially, it's going to be, we believe anyway, the first game to sort of truly embed generative AI in such a way that players, from a UGC standpoint, can customize the game and gameplay systems in runtime. And so what I am careful to say is AI is not building any of our systems. They've all been human designed by experts in their field. What we've said to the AI is we're going to treat you like the junior game designer, and you're going to understand our systems, and we're going to give you very strict parameters of what the player can change. And then using human language, you can change it in runtime in seconds. And man, if it isn't magic feeling sometimes, it's really. We love being on the bleeding edge. We've always loved being on the bleeding edge and finding cool stuff that you can do with cool toys. And so here we are again, and we found a cool toys, and we've proven some neat things, and we are fearlessly moving into a market where lots of people hate AI to try to show that there are actually really good use cases too.
All right, let's pin that hating of AI piece for a moment, because I want to come back
You'll
to
have
that.
to cover that too, right?
Drew, do we have some footage of the game that we can share now that we're talking about it?
So this is our trailer from GDC. I don't know if we're hearing sound or not, but this is the trailer that we put together for Google. Google was kind enough to give us the opportunity to show off what we were doing, really for the first time at the Google booth in the Google Lounge. And so this is a work in progress. We're not shipping till the late summer. So where we're at now is a polished alpha with lots of gameplay systems. So it's you know what, it really is coming together. There's I would call it or I would say Lee would call it a 90s video game right now. The core of it's there, but all the intricate systems and mechanics are still to come. The loot system is coming, all these other things that are going to take it from being a fun game to a really memorable game, I hope. So We still have work to do, but I'm confident we're going to get there.
Well, let's talk about how you're using AI in the game. We'll talk more about that.
Yeah. So we built this platform that's powered by Gemini, and what we essentially do is think of it almost like Legos, like customizing Legos. We When a user comes in, I should say the overarching story here, the reason why this is all going to work, our conceit is that it's the end of days. There's been a zombie apocalypse, and almost everybody's dead.
Yep.
And so it's kind of bleak, bleak British humor. And there are three survivors. There's Morgan and Ash and you, and you're all wizards. There's a reason you've managed to survive. And they come up with this plan that's going to allow them to go back in time and kill zombies. It's quantum leap, sort of setup, but with the ability to actually decide who you want to go back and possess in your time jump. So you're going to tell Morgan and Ash who you want to go back and possess to kill zombies. You sacrifice your body. You're not coming back from this. You sacrifice your body, and now you go back in time. So in terms of the reason I said all that is the way we use AI is we say the ritual is who do you want to possess? And so you can tell us as little or as much as you want about that person. You can just give us a name. You could just literally say John and hit go and see what they come out with. You're going to get a better sort of thing if you said John Ralph. They might know who that is. There's none of us are that famous outside the game. They might, Then you could say, I'm wearing a green button-down shirt. I have a beard. I have, describe your hair, anything you want to describe, color of your eyes, that you're wearing jeans, anything physical like that. You could say, I'm dressed up as a pirate, though, not just, the way you are. And then you give us some information about the rest of your life. Like, what are you into? I'm a game developer. Where do you live? Is there anyone you hate? Because that starts.
It's using it both narratively as well as like aesthetically.
Yes. So all the information that you can give us, the more the better. And I'll tell you why, but the more the better. And then you hit go. And about 10 seconds later, the beginning of what we call user-generated scenario starts. So the AI simultaneously, Gemini takes that information you gave us, turns it into our prompt engineering and our requirements, because we have very specific requirements about the art. We need a 2D head. We need the head to be off to the side. We need to remove the head's neck. And then we need to do the same thing with the torso on a separate sprite sheet, where we remove the arms and the legs. This is very Rayman art style you might have seen. So we need that too. And we need it to be facing off to the side. And ideally with no words, because when you flip-flop stuff, words end up backwards. So there's all sorts of things that we have to tell the AI. So it's not just, make it. It's make this in our art style. And so we've trained custom auras for players, for zombies. And so when the AI creates it, it's creating it in Matt's art style, our artist who drew these. Yep. So it's not just fishing out there on the internet. It's very specifically doing that. If you said someone famous, it'll describe that person to itself and create that person. So it does that, but it's not just the character creation. Like, that part's really neat. You get to be you in a game, and immediately that in and of itself is exciting. But beyond that, the AI makes choices. We let the AI choose a magical school, whether it's fire, whether it's air, whether it's water, and so forth. And they're all predefined. And it means if it picked fire, your attacks have a chance of burning. If you pick earth, they have a chance of rooting, and so forth. Then we give it a list of archetypes, because what we found is if we didn't, you got really weird outliers like 100% crit. And so we've given AI very specific regimented rules about what character stats can be. Then the AI looks at all the spells that we've designed and picks one that it thinks is relevant in some weird magic box way to the AI for that character. And it names it, and it changes the VFX hex color values, and it changes stats within very specific parameters. Then it picks a utility spell for the player. Again, this is all specific to that scenario, to the fact that you went back and played John Radoff. You're going to have these characterful abilities. And then it also creates all the dialogue associated with that. And then beat by beat, it creates 8 objectives, the 8th one being a boss fight that was picked just for you based on everything you told the AI. And each of those levels is in one of our 3D environments. It has certain objectives it can choose from. Once again, it doesn't create objectives, it chooses from ours. And so that's what I mean by Legos. Everything gets mixed and matched together. Dialogue gets created, dialogue gets narrated, and so forth. And then all of that happens in a 10-second window, all at the same time. And then you're playing, within our game.
Okay, so wow, we have a lot of things to unpack from everything you just said. I want to go to the next level on anything, but I have to return to the first comment that I made earlier about the pinned thing around AI hate. So when I talk to people when they talk about AI slop, they're usually referring to, very shallowly created games like the vibe coded games that existed a year or two ago. Like, of course, it still exists. AI has kind of moved beyond that to letting you do complete system engineering, but I think that that's still in their head. And another thing that people particularly seem to dislike is just people who go to Midjourney, grab all their art from there, and then that's the art of their game, or even worse, replicate the style of a famous artist or a well-known artist that they incorporate into their game. I'm actually fine with the vast majority of those things in the right circumstance, by the way. Like, I'm not much of a gatekeeper when it comes to who gets to be a game developer. And I think it's great that a lot of these tools have enabled just individual people to start creating and building and exploring things. That said, I hear the criticisms from people. I also understand people feeling like they invent something and then it's easily replicated. What do you think the AI hate is, and how is this for you as someone in the game industry who's entering the AI space, just realizing that there's this dislike? I realize a lot of what you're doing is a lot deeper than that, but let's start that high level. And then I'd love to hear more about, I think you said his name was Matt, your art director. I'd love to hear about his working process as an artist and art director, working in the team and then using AI around his art design to create the systems essentially that then generate the art that are used within the game.
Sure. So on the first one, the AI hate, I think it's a few things. I've had this conversation a lot. I did a couple talks at GDC about it. I think on the one hand, there's a bit of a perfect storm that happened, right? COVID ended and suddenly our market just tanked and so many people lost their jobs, and it's awful and it's still going on. And so I think that alongside that, AI suddenly emerged, and which is terrible timing. And so I think it's very easy to think that those two things are related, that because a bunch of executives are saying, we're going to get rid of everybody with AI, they're not doing that. And so, but it made AI look bad. Like, that's the reason why you're losing your job. And that sucks. And it's horrible. That hasn't really happened. I think the Yuki report that they just did showed that it was less than a 2% impact on jobs of AI. So I think it's kind of a red herring. The second thing is, look, I also don't like theft of art and writing and music and all these things that it's become synonymous with. And so, like anything else, I think it's about ethics. I think that we set up this company to be very ethical about it. I don't think AI can make games, at least yet. I don't think AI understands what fun is. I think that there's a reason why it's meant as entertainment for people, so people understand better what gameplay fun is. Maybe eventually it will. Maybe we can train AI on enough fun that it'll start to understand what fun is. But for now, what we've found is AI is much better when it's combined with a human. Jack at Google Cloud called it the Iron Man suit that is wrapped around you. And I think that's really true in so many different ways. I think you have to know what good is. AI hallucinates all the time. And so I'm sure you know this from, dabbling like everyone is with Claude and coding, is that you have to know whether it's good or not. Otherwise, it's very easy to be hosed by the AI. So there's that.
Matt's putting on the Iron Man suit every day.
Iron Man suit, yeah. So, so that's why I have a great artist. It's why I have great engineers who are coding. My Unity engineers are coding. They're not using AI to make the code for the game. And it's why, we have a professional writer on staff and my partner writing between the two of them. It's why, so we are, one of our lead platform engineers, also a musician. So we're coming at this from this sort of rock band point of view. Bring a bunch of great people together all agreeing that they want to build this. Like I didn't tell anyone they had to do this. We all came together to build this. And I think cool things, come out of that. And you could tell that everyone's having fun and laughing and enjoying themselves. And I really think something special is going to come out of this in the end, I hope. As far as the art process goes, it's been fascinating. So when I've worked with Matt for a few years now. And when I approached him about it, I said, look, I don't know what this looks like, how we treat you fairly, but that's what I want to do. That's my aim. Let's figure it out together. In terms of compensation, in terms of what happens if we ended up using that art style for a second game and he went away. Like all these things, I don't claim to have the answers to yet, but I have my team are all shareholders in the company. Everyone's going to win if this works. So I at least feel good about that. The process is really him and my lead platform engineer, the two of them working side by side. So it's been fascinating because my engineer has learned a lot about art in the process, and he does cooler stuff than almost anybody other than our artists on the team, where it comes to like what he can generate on the system because he really understands it. And it's been very much a back and forth process. We built our platform to be able to jump back and forth between solutions. We have to because everything's changing so fast. So we went from Stable Diffusion to Flux to Z-Image and even a bit of Nano Banana. And we built it so that we can do that. And all those times it means retraining models, finding best practices on training the models, dealing with like outliers. Like an interesting one was if you said it was someone wearing a suit, like, Christian Bale's character in American Psycho or a banker or whatever it is, it wanted to put arms on. Despite the fact that it never did it any other time. So you end up with all these weird edge cases like that you have to learn how to deal with. And most of that is about Matt creating more stuff to train the model with. Like we wanted all sorts of ethnicities. We wanted nose rings. The first time I said nose ring and put a circle around the nose, we had to teach it what a nose ring was. We had to teach it what a hijab was. We had to teach it about different Asian ethnicities. So all of this requires reference, hand-drawn. Because you know what? We thought maybe a solution was to find the best outputs and start training it on those outputs. Completely destroyed the art style. It really has to be authentic. I think it was fascinating. So, and then we needed to create custom LoRa's for different genders of zombies, even. There was a point in time where everybody had a bosom. Didn't matter if they were male, female, whatever. And if you didn't want it, that was just for some reason the way AI saw it. And so then we started to create multiple LoRa's. And so it's just, we've had to ask really interesting questions over the last year and a half. And sometimes there isn't even a solution for what we need yet. And so we've had to find a new way to do it or talk to the companies and say, but we need this for our industry. Background transparency removal is a great example. There was a period of time when we started, we thought it was going to double our cost, take the white off of the sprite sheet. We've had to educate folks about the fact that it's an unusable asset in our industry if it's stuck on a sheet. So it's been really interesting.
So I'd love to drill into some of the tech that you just mentioned. So first of all, even before we return to the image stuff, you're using Gemini now in the game, and prior to that, I believe you said you were using something else. I'm just curious, like, what is your exploration of that, starting with large language models on the LLM side of things? What have you discovered? Why the shift towards Gemini in particular for the game at this point? You were part of the Google booth back at GDC, so obviously the alignment with Google and Gemini is really important for you. But was that a business dev kind of decision, or was it a technical decision around what's best?
It was a technical decision, honestly. Look, I mean, everything is also, it's also about the cost of a call. So not like a business relationship. It's more about the cost of all these things happening, because ultimately the user is going to have to bear these costs. So Gemini, we were amazed to see how much faster it got. It got cheaper, and it also got more precise in terms of it fulfilling what we were asking for in all cases than ChatGPT. So we were really, so that's really the reason we swapped, was we were getting a better output. So Gemini is at the core of everything.
And is Gemini primarily to generate structured data and narrative components?
It does a whole bunch of stuff. Because it has to take the information that you give us and it has to turn it into the prompts that get sent off to our art models, that get sent off to ElevenLabs for narration that has just been written. So all these things have to kind of happen in orchestration for it to happen fast, and so we're using Suno right now for music, although that's very much in the background offline. They don't have an API, so none of our music is currently being generated in runtime. That we think we have a solution for that, so that might change. And that's one of the things about developing in this space is you kind of have to be comfortable with a really agile approach to stuff. We couldn't have said a year and a half ago, this is exactly what we're building, and this is how we're going to build it, and this is which tools we're going to use, and this is how much they cost. Like, you have to be more flexible than that, and you have to have a team that's willing to, and certainly an engineer on the AI side that's willing to continue to be aware of what's happening and play, which I think makes it a lot of fun. So when I was at GDC, my platform engineer was on call. He time shifted so that he could be available in case anything went wrong. And he made one shift on an endpoint, and our cost just dropped in half. I'm like, and I saw this happen before. I was at another event when the time chopped in half. And so whatever you think it's going to be, it's probably not going to be that in the end. It's only going to get faster and cheaper. We used to think it was going to take 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute would be okay to generate a scenario. We'd probably give you something to do alongside. Now it's faster than loading a game. It's 10 seconds. I mean, most levels don't load that fast in traditional games.
So, all right, you keep adding more tech in. We're gonna chase down all of them. So, voice synthesis. How are you using ElevenLabs within the product?
There's ElevenLabs to narrate, or the narrator who introduces every level
these are customized to the player experience, or they're
yes,
they are. So that's a really cool use of voice synthesis.
As you're playing through this series of objectives to get to the boss fight, as you're playing through a beat, the next beat's generating, and with it, the narration line of John Radoff is wondering why is it in his head. That got generated, and then immediately ElevenLabs had to turn that into voice in our custom voice that we voice directed. And then the next level has to do that, and so on and so forth. And so, ElevenLabs said that this is the first they've seen it in a game, that people are saying they're going to do this. This is the first time they've actually seen someone pulling it off. Like,
I saw some really interesting demo where at the early stages of voice synthesis, some of the things that were really neat to look at were things like sports games where the sports announcer was like actually synthesized in response to what was going on. And of course you see that in some sport games today, but they're basically canned, right? So it makes it much more seeming like real life when you do that. Another example I saw that was really interesting was voice synthesis for a flight simulator, so that you could actually communicate with the tower.
Oh, that's cool.
Air traffic control would communicate with you, and it would be synthesized in response to the actual situation, location, your circumstances, and whatnot.
Cool. So that could then tie into weather conditions, like real weather conditions, so that when you're really flying between like Seattle and Vancouver.
The guy so I have an old interview on here from 3 or 4 years ago with another guy who had started a voice synthesis company, and he was, in addition to being a voice synthesis guy, was just a hardcore flight simulator guy. So he had like flight simulator set up in his home with like, all the like the chair and the controls and everything. But he had created this demo himself. It was pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Maybe, there we go. Drew found it. Voice tech. So cool. I don't know. We probably aren't going to hear. Can we hear the audio? Does it
I
stream?
Can't hear it.
I'm not hearing it, but I don't know. We can post a link to this in the comments on X if people want to find it. But yeah, that was a really cool demo of using voice synthesis. To me, that's the neat thing. Like this is where it always comes down in generative AI applications, sort of the things that people are most annoyed by versus the things that are actually the cool new utility that generative AI brings to the table. Because things that people are annoyed by, let's face it, you replicate Morgan Freeman's voice and start doing all kinds of Morgan Freeman stuff, whether or not you actually call it Morgan Freeman, just as one example. I could fill in the blank with literally any famous voice. And people are annoyed when the voice synthesizer attempts to replicate that person's voice. And of course, they'll also complain that they're not really they're not really acting it, so it took the life out of it as well. But there's a lot of complaints around that, which is similar to the one that's applied towards art, where if you replicate someone's art style and bring it into a game, people will inevitably complain about that. That to me is this cycle of hate that happens in game development, which is people see that and they hear AI was used in the game, then they don't want to have anything to do with it because they feel like it doesn't really have artistry in it. But what you're talking about is very different than that. You're using the generative narrative experience to bring in what sounds like a very 360-degree immersive experience. The art, the story, even things like the narration is voice synthesized, not from canned prompts where you just saved yourself the money on a voice actor. You're actually using it to do something unique within the game experience.
That's what we hope. Look, I think this is one of the first games that will do something that you just couldn't do without generative AI. You couldn't possibly have a team fast enough, big enough. You just simply couldn't do it to, in 10 seconds, customize all that stuff for somebody. That's just, humans can't do that. And so, so I think and I think a lot of people have been looking for that. Like, what's the real novel use case? It's like, remember Scribblenauts back when, and how magic Scribblenauts felt when you asked for a bridge and there was a bridge, it was crazy. And so we kind of see that as that. They had to sit there with a dictionary and create everything possible. And instead, we could just, use the hive mind of generative AI. But I think it's really important that it's built on these human systems. I think it's going to be a better game for that reason. I think that humans still need to balance this stuff. We still are the ones that, like I said, know what fun is. And I think if you tried to create spells in runtime without fundamentally building a system, and so you can imagine how awful that would be.
Although one of my favorite,
continual work in progress of balancing this stuff,
Yeah. Although one of my favorite things in the Elder Scrolls tradition of games is just to find the most ridiculously overpowered spells and then roll through the rest of the game. I think anybody who plays a spellcaster in those games ends up doing that. But yes, if you're going to generate it, you don't want it to generate the I win button. You want them to have to discover the I win button.
Exactly. Look, we want this to be a compelling roguelike game, and people have expectations coming into that. And so, the first playthrough of the full game is going to be tuned so that everybody can play it. It's not going to be so punishing that someone who's just curious about all this, I hope it'll be their first, roguelike experience. But there's a harder mode, and there are harder modes, and there's, sort of nightmare difficulty, and this, it's not an easy game. And every time I beat the boss, my engineers make it harder. I'm like the litmus. If I can get through it, they don't think it's hard enough. So they keep messing with me like that.
Another area of tech you talked about was the use of the various diffusion models. You started with Stable Diffusion, then you went to Flux, which I think Black Forest, the folks there came out of Stable Diffusion. And today you're using a little bit of Nano Banana.
We mainly use Z image right now.
What are you using?
We're mainly using Z image. I said Z image, and I keep forgetting that I am American. I'm not British. Z image.
We have an international audience, and we're happy to say Z for anybody.
Z image, Z image, whatever you want to call
it. UK, Australia.
That's our main use. Nano Banana does really neat things though too, and so we're still exploring how we can integrate Nano Banana in as well. We've done some neat tests
with the image model. So, I mean, you've done so much work now trying to align art, and you talked about sort of the image pipeline with Matt and whatnot. Like, how, other than just pure cost, which is one aspect of operating any of these generative art models, what are the factors that you look at?
I'd say the biggest one is speed and quality. Like we want it to be indicative of Matt's art style. It's really important to us. And so we do need to be fast because we don't want people sitting around waiting. And that kind of breaks the magic if you do, but it has to be super authentic. And the first time, like when we started this, our earliest tests, we would have 3 versions of it get created, which was expensive and kind of wonky that you had to kind of pick between them. We've now gotten it to the point that, the output is solid enough that it's usually fine. and indicative of what you expected. And in his art style. And anytime it hasn't been, we've gone back and retrained the model to be 100% sure that because it's not even just creating the characters. There's even one of the objectives that you have to do in some levels is a search objective where you have to find an item in the environment. The AI actually creates that item in Matt's art style. So it's even things like that. Our loot system, the sort of gloves and shoes that you'll be able to loot, again, all in Matt's art style. And Matt's thrilled because he doesn't have to do a whole sprite sheet of hand animations and things like that. So it takes some of that really tedious grunt work away from a small team.
One of the things that comes to mind when we talk about diffusion models, but then it extends out to everything generative, is cloud-based APIs for doing generation versus actually getting it onto your own device. So for people who don't realize it, like virtually all of these diffusion art models that you see out there, like Flux and whatnot, you can download those to your computer. You can just run them locally. You don't have to go to the cloud and pay someone a fee to do that. I'm a big believer in models on the user's own device for a lot of reasons. One is I think it's much more decentralized. It means that you have more competition in the market, but also just from a practical standpoint, the ability to run inference against your own local model is just a much better economic model. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but years down the road, I would love to see games that just do all this generation in the game. It's not a cloud-based game. Like it's basically built in. I'm curious how you've thought about that, whether are you doing all your I'm assuming you're doing all your generation cloud-based at this point for the game.
Currently it's all cloud-based. I'm really interested to see the work that Unity's back to doing. It seems like they were out, they're kind of back in on doing this stuff. We've had conversations with folks like NVIDIA about it as well. I think we're somewhat concerned about user requirements on the PC because it could skyrocket the minimum requirements.
Well, we're trying to be GPU.
And so that was kind of what we were told by some of the tech companies is kind of be careful about that. That's going to really hurt. So, but I do agree with you that it's going to be faster, cheaper, small language models for the exact specific things that you need. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. We didn't want to reinvent every wheel. With the size of our team and the sort of speed we were trying to get to our first proof of this thing, we had to pick and choose our battles. But I do agree with you that I think it absolutely has to head that way because there are issues that are kind of, I don't want to say unsolvable right now, but really complex. Like when you're developing a game, these GPUs aren't all spun up for you at these services all the time, and so you can end up with load time, longer times at the first use of the day. Things like that. So we've had to sort of figure out a lot of issues like that would go away if we were doing it with a local model in the user's machine. So I think we're going to figure that stuff out. We just need a bit more time and space to figure some of those challenges out.
Better business model for all of us ultimately too, to put it on device, because I mean, let's face it, we don't want to pay cloud costs for every interaction
That's exactly
that players participate in. So it's a much more scalable business model to be able to bring it on device. But yes, of course, we're going to need much more powerful GPUs than we currently.
I've been told mobile is actually pretty good. That's what one of the chip companies told me is that if this, and we do plan to do a mobile version of this, that where it comes to the mobile device, we probably could do a lot of it on device. So compared to PC user, we don't know what a user has.
Yeah, I forget how many zettaflops are present on iPhones, but Apple has basically shipped more AI inference power than anybody at this point.
And the AMD chips are pretty awesome. So I think that there's probably potential there, but we started on PC with this as opposed to mobile's going to come a little bit later. But I totally agree with you.
All right, well, let's pivot back towards a little bit more game-centered stuff. So you're building.
Our engineers are probably listening to me and saying, "Susan, just shut the hell up. You don't know what you're talking about."
Well, then they can come on the channel right now and join in. We'll send them a StreamYard link.
My platform engineer is off for 2 days, so he won't hear this, and he won't tell me I butchered everything about it.
So roguelikes are a really interesting genre for generative stuff in general. I mean, really, roguelikes were generative before we even had this word generative. We just called it procedural back then because it wasn't really an AI running off a neural net. It was a rule-based system for doing things like map generation.
I know, isn't it fascinating that we're hand-wringing about AI, but we've had AI for so long, and we're a software business. I should make that point. That's really the thing that frustrates me is, unlike film and other areas of entertainment and art, we're software and technology when it comes down to. Yes, we're art, and I'd be the last person to ever claim that we weren't. But without computers and technology, we don't have these video games. And so, of all people, we should be the ones figuring out how to use it ethically, how to use it to do novel things. So it kind of frustrates me.
We wouldn't even have AI if it wasn't for games, because if NVIDIA hadn't been shipping GPUs, which was largely for a video game market for years and years and years before we discovered all of these other applications of a GPU, like having a really huge matrix, which is what you need to be able to do inference. That's what actually so games are responsible for AI.
For the cause, yeah. It's like sort of those twists in the movie where it turns out
But the point about roguelikes, though, beyond just sort of that meta level of like, yes, the game industry has always been innovative on all these fronts. AI has been one of them going way back. I mean, chess games had AI in them long before we had any of the things that we now call AI. Of course, the words artificial intelligence, that has morphed over time. But I love the idea of using more generative components in roguelikes, because you do ultimately run into a lot of walls with rule-based systems that you get in proceduralism. So, I mean, for people that aren't familiar with the whole legacy of roguelike games, I forget the date. I mean, I think we're talking maybe certainly 1980s, maybe as far back as 1970s for some of the roguelike games. Maybe Drew can fact check me on the.
I was just going to say, I wonder if Drew could tell us.
But it goes way back, and these were some of the earliest games to have this idea of, the map doesn't have to be the map. The map could be generated based on rules that you navigate, so that there's a lot of uniqueness to the experience each time. And I'm seeing Dungeons and Dragons logo up there. I can't quite make out the other text that you're throwing up at the moment, but of course, Dungeons and Dragons was a generative experience out of the brain of not just the dungeon master. It was more of a multiplayer collaborative generative experience between all the participants, which I also
Yeah, you're right there, John. Actually, it says that Beneath Apple Manor in 1978 actually predated Rogue in the early 80s. So you're right, it did actually roll with that. That's crazy that it was 70s. Wow. Insane.
Yes. But I think the business case for it is the clear evidence that players like to be able to have that replayability around novelty and getting to try new things. So, fast forward from the earlier rogues to the one that most people are probably familiar with, which is the Diablo series, which virtually all gamers are familiar with. Diablo is a roguelike game that just happens to have a really nice action RPG wrapper around it. Yeah. But a lot of the replayability comes from not just the maps, that's kind of the straightforward piece, but the different characters and things you can play with.
Loot mechanics, the different rarities of loots and stuff. Yeah. The reason, the fundamental reason why we decided to make a roguelike to begin with was it's what we all play. Our team, the 8 of us, we're all hardcore Rogue fans, whether it's card battlers or more traditional RPGs or have you. It was a genre that we felt like we were all avid enough players of it that we would know what great looked like. And so that's kind of is always the bar there is, is this something we would want to play? Would this be worthy of a spot on our Steam list, But yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's so many interesting things about the rogue genre. I think it's, it'd be interesting to look at whether the punishment of rogue games, because they're punishing, right? You have to be willing to die and die and die and die and come back and do a little bit better and die. Whether that's also helped led to, the Souls-like genre and the fact that, they're the most punishing thing of all. It feels like this is a trend towards difficulty in games and challenge in games that wasn't there for a while, when things got sort of watered down. I wonder if we've swung the other way now in PC games.
I see a comment here from LinkedIn coming in from Jane Whitaker. Is that a coworker, Susan?
No, I know Jane. Jane's like an icon. Jane's like early EA, 3DO, Alien versus Predator.
Jane's commenting about Mike Singleton's work on procedural technology.
Oh, fantastic.
Jane, if you have a moment, post more details, like when did that happen? Yeah, I mean, the interesting balance between the procedural stuff versus generative stuff is with procedural, you have a lot of control over what actually gets made. So you have all the constraints in place. You can, for example, the spell casting problem we referred to before. When you have a character progression that gets you to the spells that you want to have, and it's always the next cool thing, feels just out of reach. But if you complete the current level and level up, suddenly you dominate for a while before it then turns around, and then you struggle for a little bit again until you get the new capability that lets you dominate. Like that whole sort of struggle to dominance cycle that happens in a lot of these games, and the ability to bolt that onto the right procedural mechanisms that allow that to be expressed and enjoyed as opposed to feeling random. That's, I think, a lot of the magic that goes into a really good roguelike, like, virtually all.
And that's kind of like what the coming months are about. Like you nailed it right there. Like once the core systems are in place, we are building a sort of traditional, call it Hades, Vampire Survivors, like level up loop within a scenario, so that you can kind of have that ephemeral experience of getting to the end against the boss fight. But outside of that, there's also a stat-based system to spend your experience points and get better and better. But we also have something that we call our PTSD system. Because you're witnessing the trauma of an apocalypse, it's going to start messing with the game, and you're going to have to start reconciling with the tragedy that's going on around you. And so I don't want to think too much about it, but we have this whole other system, which is sort of yin and yang with the level up system, where you're going to have to make decisions about how much you want the game to mess with you versus dealing with your trauma. So it's, plus the loot system that we're building and the sort of combinations that we're hoping will happen from the loot system. We're big RPG players. I played the hell out of every Diablo game, not to mention MMOs over the years since EQ beta. And so I think we're really excited about how that system comes together. Like this is the fun part now, is getting from here to there to where it really gets special.
Are you building a community around the game?
We are. We just started. We've established our Discord. Our community manager is working to start getting the word out. It's early. It's going to be end of summer when we get to early access. So we have a lot of time. We really want people to understand what we're building for all the reasons we talked about on the AI side. So we've been a bit cautious and making sure that we're constantly telling the story. And we really, one of the reasons for early access is we really want the community involved. We want this to not feel like something that was pushed on everybody. And we want to understand even what's important to people. There's almost no limit to what we could teach the AI to do with us. But some of it is like, is anyone going to want that? Is that touch going to be interesting? Is it worth the extra cost in a scenario to do that? And so that's where we really want to start developing, alongside the community to figure some of those things out.
What has surprised you the most, or what have the big learning moments been as you've applied generative AI to game development?
I think what would be most interesting about creating these scenarios has surprised me. When we started creating it, the first thing we thought was compelling was, hey, you could be anyone. You could, be a politician, a rock star, anyone you can think of, you could make, and you could have your experience with. Isn't that cool? It's funny, and then we realized that actually what was compelling was the fact that you could be you, and that's something that wasn't possible before. Character creators are so damn complex. You could spend a day at least in the Baldur's Gate creator. If you could do that in human language and have that adjust for you, that's really compelling. You could be, if you're Black, if you're female, you don't like Lara Croft, or whatever's important to you, you could be you. And you can be you where you live. And if your neighbor is a bully, you can fight them as your final boss fight. All those things. Then I thought that was the most compelling thing about it. But then we went to GDC, which was very confirming of something I was starting to suspect, which is people want to do weird stuff. And because we're also used to AI prompts now. So we have a collage that we put on LinkedIn of everything that got traded at the Google booth during the week, and they're weird. Like my favorite thing that I made is Teacup Tina. It's the physical embodiment of a teacup, and she runs around talking about etiquette and tea time. And they got weirder than that even. I've made Julius Caesar salad, who looks like Julius Caesar, but he has like, lettuce as a skeleton. We made Al Dente, who was a pasta man, and Rigatoni, and the same thing, Rigatoni. And so that, it turns out, is actually the really fun thing, is to just go a bit nuts with it, which is not keep with the storyline. But
yeah, I think there's some real magic to be unlocked around this idea of player creativity in the loop. I mean, but we can compare it to things that are happening. What was called vibe coding has kind of evolved more towards what we now call agentic engineering, where I sit down with Claude Code and I give it a prompt to make something, because I'll wake up that morning, I'm like, I have an idea for something. And normally I'd be like, okay, I'll put that in my to-do list for forever, basically, because I have a to-do list of like project ideas that would be like, I probably have 1,000 things at this point I'll never get to because the life's too short, unfortunately. But kind of not with agentic engineering. I can just sit down in front of Claude Code and I'm like, hey, I have this idea. How would you approach this? It'll give me a plan. I'll say, great, build it. I want to try it. But then you spend like the rest of your weekend essentially shaping it and sculpting it. That's the difference from vibe coding, where it's a little bit more trivial. Like agentic engineering with Claude Code, like you are playing a game loop, and the game is like perfecting this idea within the time available to you. You start with something and you see it, and there's a payoff. Sometimes there's a bug, so you have to like push back and explore the bug. You don't like the way it did something, so you have to change it. But then it's really cool again, and you get that real sort of sense of flow, as we would call it in the game industry, around that balance between struggle and challenge, where you just sort of flow through the experience as your skill gets refined and sort of the story and the narrative comes together. I feel like a lot of the stuff that's happening in the world of Codex and Claude Code and whatnot today, it's basically using those same parts of our brains that love games is being applied to code. Now, if we could take that coding-esque feeling, this feeling of like unbridled, unlimited creativity, and put it right into the game in some way. Now, games have to also be systems of constraints, or they're no longer games. But if you unlocked a lot of that creativity, that seems just incredible in terms of creating new kinds of game loops that just don't exist in any other form today.
100%. Yeah, I think that's what's so exciting. Like the reason I see kind of what we're doing as being more UGC than anything else is I think that's what matters to a big majority of gamers out there, right? Minecraft, Fortnite, Roblox all let you make stuff. They all empower the user to not just be, idle players, but to be creators. And you see it on TikTok and YouTube, like it or not, that's what the world's about right now is I want to be me, show off my stuff. And so I think finding ways to support that, using the speed, and efficiency of AI is going to be really important to our industry.
Rick Neal made a point here in the comments that I think is a really good one. Rick says, my thinking is that AI enables us to get to tuning and polish earlier, giving us a chance to make the game fun before we have to ship on time. Now, I don't think I'm the outlier, but every game I've ever worked on personally, it looked like a complete mess for about 90% of the way through. And then at about 90%, you think you're close to done, but actually 90% is maybe, if you're lucky, you're actually halfway through, because you don't recognize the amount of work that still remains to actually make it a fun, enduring game. And Rick is right. Like that last 10%, that's really half or more of the game, where you polish and refine and learn how people are playing and go from it's kind of game-like to now it's an actual game that's fun. That's the really hard part of this craft.
100%. And that's the part AI is not going to do for us, and that's where, I think the human jobs are safe. I don't think that AI can replace that yet anyway.
Yeah. For now.
For now. now,
we
like
have
I said,
until we have the
I'm
singularity.
not an
But yeah,
engineer. I don't know, but I feel like it's going
do
to be
your
really hard
engineers
to
use
do
these
that.
tools? You earlier, very early on, Susan, you had commented that your engineers code great. Sounds like they're working in Unity, so they're writing C# code. They're sitting in front of. They're not just telling Claude Code what to spin up. But are they
They
using
use it
any
for
of these tools as
brainstorming.
part
I
of their
think they use it
process?
for brainstorming, like, where it comes to like building a shader and getting ideas. But they're the Unity side, they're fairly traditional. My platform engineer, I believe he uses Claude and some stuff as well to support it. But again, they're all coding. But I think
Mhm,
all engineers are using it a little bit just to save a lot of time. I think with brainstorming as much as anything else. Of
mhm,
how would I do this? Great, now I'm actually going to build it.
mhm,
It's kind of like the way we first started using generative AI a few years ago was really as a way of communicating with the people who do the stuff that better than you, right? Like saying to an artist with a dolly image, "This is what I want. Now go do something actually good with that." Is
mhm.
really useful because some of us are happy to draw stick figures, and you end up going through so many iteration cycles. Whereas I think AI allows everyone to have at least a level of proficiency in other skills, so that you can explain to someone who's a master what you want. And I think that that's really helpful. The thing is, going back again to AI and like comparing it to other technologies that have come up, it's so much a part of the fabric of our lives now. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that. It's not even, just our games. We had to change a battery in a heater yesterday. And Lee just holds the phone up to the wall with Gemini and says, "Hey, I need to change a battery. How do I do this?" She's like, "Oh, that looks like it's a such and such. I'll pull up the manual now." So which button do I press? Oh, you see that button? And then that happened. And batteries. Okay. Should I tell my wife to get me some batteries? That sounds like a great idea. It was this hilarious interchange. But in the end, we changed the battery without doing anything other than holding our phone up to it. I'm like, God,
Absolutely,
like
yeah. I had a
what the
similar
city's doing
experience.
right
Like
now.
a water leak detector was in a condo that we were in,
Yeah, that kind of stuff,
and
right?
I didn't know what it had an alarm going off, and it was totally inscrutable. Also, it was in French because it was in Montreal. So I couldn't
Sure.
understand what the heck was going on. So I just took a picture of it with my phone and sent it to Chat GPT. Told me exactly what to do. I mean, it was crazy.
Sure,
So
I even told him not to touch a certain button because he could be electrocuted. Please be sure not to touch that button. You didn't touch that button, did you?
Susan, this has been such a fun conversation. I think we've
Has
given
been
so
great.
many people things to explore. I think everybody's going to have a list of technologies, ideas to go take a look at, but also your game. So
Yes.
in the closing here, what does everybody need to know about the game that we didn't talk about already, and how do they go find it? How do they join the community that it
So
sounds
we
like you're just
have
doing up?
just started the mammoth task of wish listing, which so I would love wish lists, and play testing. So we're actively live, privately play testing. I'm letting people in every week. I would love people to play test and give us feedback. As of tomorrow, we'll have our Steam auth in and a brand new splashy build with sound effects and stuff. So play test, and then get involved in our community. Our Discord is microscopic right now because we just started it, but everyone's talking about gameplay and design and what's coming next. And wouldn't this be a cool feature? Exactly the sort of community I want to have. So I'm really excited about that. So I hope get involved with us. And as everyone can see, we're trying to develop in public here. I think it takes a village, like hive mind mentality with new
Mhm.
technologies. And so, we're friends with other companies in the space who are building. We're not all being like secretive with each other. Everyone's kind of trying to share and be open and talk best practices and things. So, if people have questions, reach out to me. And yeah, but
Awesome.
yes, we're on
All right.
Steam playtest wish list.
Okay, and for the transcript, say where where they should go. Because other fact that I learned recently is YouTube is now the number one authority source for discoverability through language models. So if you want to be discovered in language models, you got to say things in
There you
addition to
go.
being on a video.
10sixgames.com or youversuszombies.com will take you to
There
our
you go.
site and give you a link to everything you could possibly need if you're interested in checking out the insanity of what we've built.
Outstanding. Okay, Susan, this is awesome. Good luck with the game. I'm going to be
Thank
playing it.
you.
It sounds like it's one of the first real realizations of my own vision of what I wanted these generative games to become. So I'm excited
Thank
for
you.
everything that you're doing. Rick Neal asks again, how do I find the game? I think you go to 106games.com, right?
Yes,
And
106games.com, uversuszombies.com, and that'll get you to us. Or go to Steam and just search for You versus Zombies as well, and you can wish list there.
there you go. Susan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic. We covered so
My pleasure.
much. It's been a delight. Love to have you back anytime.